Right, so hopefully I don't burn any future bridges with this video, but we've reached a point where I'd say the best possible way to describe the way that English media talks about players is by using this photo here. This is what best describes the way English media talks about its players. Football over the last couple of years has made a lot of strides in making the world's game be a lot more comfortable for everyone around the world. Whether it be the No Racism in Football campaign, rainbow laces, or the acknowledgement of the BLM movement. There have been movements made, albeit surface level ones, to make the game, like I said, more comfortable. I'm sure that whatever race and ethnicity relations we have now are probably 100 times better than what we would have been talking about for 30 and 40 years ago. But despite these efforts made by the powers that be, but at the end of the day, certain members of English football coverage still show very nasty biases when it comes to how they talk about the players. And I'm not talking about bias in terms of what teams they support, but I mean more so bias based off the color of the player's skin. In a field where realistically these guys should be locked in and should be able to talk about stuff that happens on and off the pitch from very objective standpoints, there's usually two entirely different narratives that are painted for players of just different skin tones, which is absolutely tragic because these pundits really have the opportunity to protect most players, but they end up not. And I get it, right? Racism exists in the world. I think it'd be very naive to think otherwise. A black player who just simply misses an important penalty can be subject to an immense amount of racial abuse, both in person and online. And pundits, like I said, have the opportunity to protect these players, to just simply talk about things from an objective standpoint, but they tend to run with narratives that paint them in bad lights. The thing is, we as fans either don't see or pretend not to see these biases that are just clearly staring us in the face, but we really need to call it out. But real quick boys, if you're new to the channel enjoying the content, don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. We do drop weekly football videos as well, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss an upload. And if you're not new to the channel boys, welcome back. Glad to have you around for another video. But with that being said boys, let's get into the inherent biases that affect the footballing media. I do just want to say I'm not throwing anyone specifically under the bus. There's no one person who's actively telling these people what to do or to say, but more so I believe it's just an issue of individual biases bleeding out and affecting the way these pundits and journalists approach stories. Are these biases a little bit racist? Yes, and that's usually what ends up being the problem. And in fact, I'm not alone in this train of thinking. A lot of fans end up pointing these biases out because the media tends to lean into it when it comes to talking about certain players. Additionally, polling was conducted in the UK, which found that over 50% of adults in that poll found racism to be a problem within football in general. And yes, we're getting statistical for this one because there's going to be a lot of idiots in the comment section talking about this isn't actually real and I'm just crazy. No, you are crazy. This is real. Biases are real and biases can be racist. So with that being said, let me break this down a little bit for you guys. So I think the best way to talk about how certain players get preferential treatment in the media, usually due to their skin color, is to briefly talk about how the English media talks about flops. You know, the players who usually go to a new team hoping to make an impact and win trophies, but ultimately end up failing in one way or another. You'd assume that for the most part, if a player makes a big money move to a big club and they end up failing, that they all get the same treatment and questions by the media. It's only fair, right? But I hate to break it to you, but you'd be wrong. And there's no better way to talk about this than by discussing how the media has portrayed Jack Grealish versus Paul Pogba. Realistically, these are two players who check off a lot of similar boxes in their career. Both guys performed at incredibly high levels and were able to showcase their incredible talents to the whole world and eventually earn themselves big money moves to clubs in Manchester. Pogba would join United in 2016 for 105 million euros, which at that point was a world record, and Grealish would sign for Man City in 2021 for about 120 million euros, an even higher fee. And although Pogba's a midfielder and Grealish plays higher up in the attack, both were usually applauded for their great technical ability and their showmanship as well. But this is where the similarity in their narratives end. See, for Pogba, pretty much his entire time at United was a nightmare, or at least that's how the media would want you to see it. If you ask most actual United fans, you'll know that Pogba usually gave it his all in most matches that he played for the club, pretty much until the end when things got a little bit too toxic to be in control and he ended up deciding to leave the club. Pogba pretty much weekly would showcase his incredible passing range, his ability to dictate matches, and his phenomenal dribbling ability. Would he have off matches? Of course he would. United were far from perfect during his time with the club, and when all was said and done, Pogba would at least leave with a Europa League title and an EFL Cup. But despite this, most media outlets constantly tried to bury Pogba. No matter what he did, Pogba was always criticized for the fact that he cost the club so much money, amongst other things. And don't get me wrong, no player really is ever worth that much money unless it's like a top 5 player, and Pogba didn't choose his transfer fee, but it's something that still follows him around to this day. Nothing Pogba ever did for the club was ever good enough in the media's eyes, and he would usually be the first person blamed if United lost a match. If he was injured, media outlets didn't even care. He would still get a lot of attention and be criticized for really anything that he did. The guy would breathe and he'd be in trouble. The guy would blink and they would call him a toxic virus in the United dressing room. It was absolutely crazy. All the guy wanted to do was play football. But on the other hand, we have Jack Grealish. Grealish, since moving to City, has been absolutely terrible. He has come up with decent moments here and there for the club, but overall has quickly become one of the most one-dimensional players in the Premier League who doesn't really offer too much to the side. And this is all as an attacker, mind you. Grealish is 100% lucky to be part of a historically great Man City side, but often finds himself riding the coattails of his teammates. It got to the point where Pep even had to come out and say that he didn't even sign Grealish for goals and assists. Again, mind you, as an attacker. And I get it, right? Football isn't all about goals and assists. What are you offering your team if you're not at least producing output? And the answer is nothing. Because like I said, even from just watching Grealish play, you can see how quickly he fell off from his time at Aston Villa. He's a shadow of his former self. The guy is absolutely terrible and he cost the club a fortune. Yet what does the media say? Nothing. No mention of his price tags, no mention of his terrible attacking output, absolutely nothing. And now you might be thinking to yourself, what is this even proof of? Well, my friends, this is literally called a bias, and that just so happens to be coded in a little bit of racism. Pogba, for simply being a flashy black player that cost Manchester United so much money, was constantly lambasted and dragged through the mud, while Mr. Grealish can essentially f**k around for an entire season and receive no criticism. Grealish really can do whatever he wants. He can go out, do whatever he wants, really, and the media will not give a damn. It's crazy. And just a fun fact as well, Pogba in just his time at United registered more goals and assists than Jack Grealish has in his entire career in the Premier League. Mind you, Pogba played as a midfielder and pretty deep at times for United, and Grealish is an attacker. But hey, look, maybe I'm just crazy, right? Wrong. You guys need to wake up because it's so incredibly in your face. And if I really wanted to, I could keep using Pogba and Grealish as examples, because like I said, Pogba would just breathe and he'd be public enemy number one, while Grealish can parade around like a drunken buffoon and be considered Britain's darling. But I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't give you different examples. This season, Phil Foden, who's coming off being the player of the year in the Premier League last season, was tasked with essentially leading this City team to glory and is drowning in the responsibility this season. Mind you, this is also after a Euro campaign where Foden looked like he couldn't even pass a ball for 5 yards. Yet, this entire season, pretty much zero criticism for the guy. But his fellow Englishman, Marcus Rashford, who's also had a poor season in the United side that overall has been poor as well, has been pretty much written off completely this season. And granted, with this one, Foden probably has a little bit more in the bank since he's been a little bit more consistent over the years. But if we're looking at just straight facts, this current season of football, why is Foden not getting anywhere near the same amount of criticism as Rashford? Like I said, Rashford's already part of this failing United side, so be it. Like I said, Foden was tasked. He was given the keys to lead this City team to glory for another year, and he's failing hard. And yet when it comes to criticism from the media, crickets. And with that being said, now you might be thinking to yourself, whoa, this guy is only defending United players and attacking City players. And that's just not true, because it becomes even more clear when you see just how much black players get pretty much criticized for anything they do off the pitch. For example, throughout his pretty successful Premier League career, Raheem Sterling has been subject to a handful of pretty nasty attacks by the media. The guy bought his mom a house and was labeled as an overspender, a guy who had no control over his money. He got a tattoo in representation of his father's passing due to gun violence and was lambasted by the media. Compare that to, again, his white counterparts, who can pretty much do whatever they want off a football pitch and you pretty much get nothing coming back from the media. It's really just a constant cycle. Recently though, just to take it back, it has been Grealish who's pretty much been able to do anything he wants off a pitch and not get any criticism, or on the pitch for that fact. Play terribly, players like Rashford, Saka will get criticized ahead of him just because. He goes and gets hammered, it wanders the streets, no problem, he's just one of the lads. But someone like Rashford gets 100 times the hate for simply going to an NBA game during his free time. Again, I'm not implicitly calling anyone out specifically or any specific media group, but it's just hard to ignore the racial biases that exist in football when they're right in front of you. Again, taking you back to the photo of the video. And it's not something new, right? It's something that's been happening for years. And it's not even only happening in England. This is a problem really in most big countries, Spain and Italy as well. It's a very deep-rooted problem, but it definitely affects football a lot. And even taking it back to like 2011, right, when the Suarez and Evra incident happened, you had players coming out and defending Luis Suarez just because, right, Evra was considered a crybaby and made to feel like his reaction was way too over the top for literally no reason. As time goes on, I really don't see this getting any better, unfortunately, but at least we as fans can be a little bit more cognizant about it. At least I hope that's what you get out of this this video, there's a big problem with the way that big media really creates these stories and makes these narratives about these players who are just simply trying to go about their day and do their jobs and live their lives the same way that their counterparts are doing. It's really sick, but the best we can hope for is things change at some point or another.